In this video, we are going to be talking about semicolons. And a good way to remember what a semicolon is we know or should know what a colon looks like. Looks like that right there. Semi means half or partial. So our semicolon looks like this. It partially looks like a colon. So now that we have a reminder of how to recognize it, let's take a quick look at the rule for it. So a semicolon joins two independent clauses that are closely related. Just as a quick reminder, an independent clause is a clause that could be a complete sentence on its own. It might be surrounded by a dependent clause or some other independent clauses, but if you took that independent clause out of the sentence, it could be a complete standalone sentence. If you want a bigger refresher or a more complete review of independent and dependent clauses, then you can look at our comma errors part 1 video. So when we're looking for an independent clause, I might underline something and put IC for independent clause. DC would be a dependent clause, which would be a fragment on its own. So let's look at this sentence right here. Some graphic designers use Photoshop. Others use tools like Canva. So this means that if there's a semicolon there, it should be able in most cases to be, or rather in all cases, to be replaced by a period. So let's check out if that would be right. Because if it's replaced by a period, that would mean that we have an independent clause over here and an independent clause over here. So some graphic designers use Photoshop. Yep, that's an independent clause. Others use tools like Canva. Yep, that's an independent clause. And they are closely related. So they're talking about the same subject here. And I think it's important to note that when you're being tested on this on the ACT, they're going to be questions where it's asking you whether or not a semicolon would work there, but it's typically going to be asking you, are these two independent clauses rather than, are they closely related? It's not going to be asking you super ambiguous questions. So looking at the conjunctive adverbs, these are often used with semicolons. So if you've never heard this word before, or this phrase, conjunctive adverbs, totally fine. But let's just do a quick look at them. So sometimes people call them their themos to help them remember. Important that it's themo. S is plural on there. So we actually don't have an S down at the bottom here. So this stands for therefore, however, also, moreover, and otherwise. These are not all of the conjunctive adverbs in the world. These are just the ones that, for the most part, are more commonly used. So a lot of times these are used between two independent clauses, also joined by a semicolon, which we can see in this sentence right here. Many graphic designers live off of their freelance work. However, rising healthcare costs have made it difficult for these contract workers. So let's double check that this semicolon is being used correctly. So many graphic designers live off of their freelance work. Is that an independent clause? Yes. However, rising healthcare costs have made it difficult for these contract workers. Yep, that is also an independent clause. So we're good right there too. And keep in mind, again, if a semicolon can be used there, then we should also be able to use a period there. And again, subject is closely related. Let's look at this example from the ACT. While the harmonica was marketed originally as a child's toy, and that underlined portion is where we're going to be looking, it eventually became a valued portable instrument for folk and blues musicians. So we could keep it as it originally was, or it's asking us, does a semicolon work there? And because of this word right here, while, we know that this first clause is dependent. It's not independent. So while the harmonica was marketed originally as a child's toy, we can just tell from this word right here, using like relying on our ear, that there needs to be more information. This could not be a standalone sentence. So because it's a dependent clause and an independent clause next to each other, a semicolon would not work. So we can also use our knowledge of the semicolon as a really fast elimination tool to know that now we would have to narrow it down to these three, and our answer would be no change because this is an introductory element.